Once upon a time, in the war-torn outskirts of the hidden rain village, under skies that seemed forever drenched with sorrow, a boy named Nagato was born into a world already etched by deep wounds. His first memories were not of warmth or comfort, but of hunger and fear, of the distant rumbles of conflict that never truly stopped. His parents, gentle souls caught in the crossfire of a senseless war, did their best to protect him, to shelter him with stories of peace and promises of better days. But even the strongest walls could not withstand the storms that raged beyond them. It was on a night like countless others, heavy with the scent of wet earth and smoke, that Nagato's small world was shattered forever. Leaf Shinobi, mistaking his family for enemies, broke into their home, and in the terrified chaos that followed, Nagato's parents fell before his young eyes. Grief exploded inside him, raw and blinding, and with it, something ancient and terrible awakened. His Rinnegan, the eyes of legend, manifesting in the depths of his despair. From that moment on, Nagato was adrift, a fragile soul tossed upon the violent currents of a world that seemed to have no place for kindness. But fate, in its strange mercy, did not leave him to drown alone. In the ruins of his shattered village, he met Konan, a quiet girl with hands as delicate as folded paper, and Yahiko, a fiery boy who refused to bow to despair. Together, they formed a bond stronger than blood, a small, stubborn family built from the ruins of their former lives. They scavenged and survived, leaning on each other when the world offered them nothing else. Each night, huddled together beneath broken roofs or starless skies, they whispered dreams of a different future, one where no child would have to cry alone in the rain. Their lives changed irrevocably when they encountered a figure cloaked in both mystery and greatness. Jiraiya, one of the Sanin, a wandering ninja who took pity on the trio of war orphans. Seeing the flickering light in their eyes, he made a decision that would ripple across history. He chose to stay, to teach them, to give them the tools to survive, and perhaps, in time, to change the world. Under his guidance, Nagato learned what it meant to be strong, not just in body, but in heart. He discovered the weight of responsibility, the delicate balance between power and compassion. Jiraiya spoke of peace, of understanding, of finding a way to break the endless cycle of hatred that devoured the world. Nagato listened with all his soul, clinging to those words like lifelines in the flood. And yet, even the strongest teachings can falter against the relentless tide of reality. When Jiraiya eventually deemed them ready and left them to forge their own paths, the trio was left facing a world still steeped in cruelty. Yahiko, ever the idealist, rallied others to their cause, forming an organization dedicated to ending the wars that ravaged their lands, the Akatsuki. For a time, Hope bloomed in the hidden rain. Their movement gained momentum, drawing followers who shared their dream of peace through unity. But dreams are fragile things, easily shattered by the cold hand of fear. It was Hanzo, the self-proclaimed leader of the hidden rain, who first saw the growing Akatsuki, not as a force for peace, but as a threat to his fragile grip on power. In a cruel twist, Hanzo conspired with others to betray Yahiko, setting a trap that would end in blood and heartbreak. Cornered and faced with the impossible choice between submission and death, Yahiko chose sacrifice. In a final, desperate act to protect his friends, he took his own life, thrusting himself onto Nagato's weapon. His last words, a plea to Nagato to continue their dream, burned themselves into Nagato's soul, branding him with a burden too great for any heart to bear. In the aftermath of Yahiko's death, something within Nagato broke beyond repair. His grief, deeper than any ocean, curdled into something colder, something terrible. He saw, with agonizing clarity, that the world did not understand peace through words alone. If hope could be slain so easily, if dreams could be crushed beneath the boots of the powerful, then perhaps the only path to peace was through overwhelming force, through pain so profound that no one would dare to lift a hand against another ever again. Thus was born Pain, the new face of Nagato's dream, twisted by grief. Using his Rinnegan, he created the 6 paths of pain. 6 bodies he controlled remotely, each representing a fragment of his will. From the shadows, hidden within a mechanical tower in the heart of the hidden rain, Nagato ruled as a god of judgment, bringing swift, merciless retribution to those who perpetuated suffering. To the oppressed, Pain was a savior. To the guilty, a harbinger of ruin. His philosophy was simple and absolute. Only by knowing true pain could humanity understand true peace. And so, under sheets of endless rain, Pain's legend grew. The Akatsuki transformed from a grassroots movement into a fearsome organization of rogue shinobi, each carrying their own burdens, their own scars. They hunted the tailed beasts, capturing them one by one, believing that by wielding such unimaginable power, they could impose peace upon the world. To Nagato, it was no longer a matter of ideals or dreams. It was necessity, inevitability. Yet somewhere, deep within the hollow shell he had become, the boy who once wept in the ruins of his home still stirred, still yearned. He had wrapped his heart in iron and silence, but the ghost of Yahiko's laugh, the memory of Konan's quiet kindness, remained. Pain wore the mask of a god, but beneath it, Nagato remained a boy, chasing a broken dream, stumbling blindly through the darkness, trying desperately to find a way out. And in the distance, fate prepared to weave new threads into Nagato's story. Threads spun from the stubborn will of a boy named Naruto Uzumaki, who would one day stand before him, not with hatred, but with understanding. But that meeting still lay far ahead, on roads paved with sorrow, sacrifice, and the endless falling rain. The rain never ceased in the hidden rain village, a constant, melancholic drumbeat against rooftops and empty streets, as if the very sky wept for the sorrow carried within its walls. From his throne of solitude, within the towering mechanical citadel, Nagato watched it all, his emaciated form suspended within a massive contraption of needles and wires, his life force siphoned slowly into the 6 bodies he commanded. The 6 paths of pain became his voice, his hands, his enforcers of justice. No longer would he speak as a man. He would speak as a god. And gods did not beg for peace. They demanded it. Each of the 6 paths represented something deeply personal to Nagato, pieces of his pain and belief stitched into flesh and steel. Yahiko's body, now repurposed as the Diva path, became the face of pain itself. It was an act of devotion and desperation, keeping Yahiko close, even in death, as the symbol of the ideals they once shared. The other paths, gruesome, reanimated corpses, became vessels through which Nagato delivered his divine will. His enemies never even knew the frail boy who watched them through distant, cold eyes, hidden far from the battlefield. They knew only pain. Under Pain's leadership, the Akatsuki expanded its influence, drawing together powerful and dangerous shinobi from all corners of the world. Each member was a soul scarred by war, betrayal, or loss, drawn by the promise of a new order where their suffering would no longer be in vain. There was Itachi Uchiha, silent and burdened by secrets darker than night. Kisame Hoshigaki, the monstrous sharkman who sought a purpose beyond endless killing. Deidara, the artist who saw destruction as the purest expression of beauty. Each was a puzzle piece in Pain's intricate plan to gather the tailed beasts, the immense, living weapons of chakra that represented both humanity's greatest fears and its greatest hopes. Capturing the tailed beasts was no easy task. Each was a force of nature, capable of leveling villages and wiping out armies. But Pain and his Akatsuki comrades were relentless. With every successful capture, they moved closer to Nagato's ultimate goal, to create a weapon of such devastating power that it would cow the entire world into submission. It was not peace born of love or understanding, but of terror and awe, a peace that would be written in the language of despair. Meanwhile, the Hidden Leaf Village, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon, continued its peaceful existence. But seeds of destiny were already being sown. Naruto Uzumaki, the vessel of the 9 tails, the final and most critical piece of Pain's plan, was growing stronger every day. To Nagato, Naruto represented the final obstacle and the final hope, a chance to test whether the world could truly change, or whether it must be broken first. But before that confrontation could come, Pain's attention turned to a smaller, yet no less significant target: Jiraiya. news reached Nagato's ears that his former master was investigating the Akatsuki, seeking out the truth behind the rumors of their growing power. Jiraiya, the man who once cradled Nagato's fragile dreams of peace, now unknowingly stood against the monstrous vision those dreams had become. It was inevitable that their paths would cross again, but the boy Jiraiya had known was long gone, buried beneath layers of loss and conviction. When Jiraiya infiltrated the hidden rain, Pain responded not with hesitation, but with cold, brutal efficiency. Summoning his 6 paths, he met his former mentor not as a wayward student seeking guidance, but as an immutable force of nature, a god passing judgment upon a relic of a world that had failed. Their battle was fierce, a clash of philosophies as much as strength. Jiraiya fought valiantly, piecing together the terrible truth of Pain's identity, even as he was overwhelmed by the sheer, relentless power of the 6 paths. In his final moments, Jiraiya realized that the boy he once loved as a son had become something he could no longer recognize. Yet even in death, Jiraiya managed to etch one last message to the world, a cryptic code that might one day lead to Pain's undoing. His death was not in vain. It planted the seeds of doubt, the smallest crack in the facade Nagato had built around himself. Somewhere deep within, a part of Nagato mourned, not just for the loss of his former master, but for the boy he had been, the dreams he had abandoned. As Jiraiya's body sank into the depths of the rain-soaked village, Pain stood victorious, yet strangely hollow. Victory had become routine, empty of joy or satisfaction. Only the mission remained, a grim march toward a future painted in shades of gray. He turned his gaze toward Konoha, the hidden leaf village, the birthplace of so much pain and sorrow, the place that harbored the vessel of the 9 tails. His resolve hardened. If pain was the only language the world understood, then he would speak it fluently. He would make the hidden leaf listen. He would make them understand. And so, beneath the endless rain, preparations began. The Akatsuki moved like shadows across the world, tightening the noose, drawing closer to their ultimate confrontation. Nagato's frail body grew weaker with each passing day, yet his will burned brighter, a star on the verge of collapse. The boy who had once cried for his mother now prepared to make the entire world cry, not out of malice, but out of a desperate, shattered love. A love that had lost its way in the dark. The rain persisted, as though it were mourning the inevitable destruction yet to come. High atop his mechanical throne, Nagato tightened his grip on destiny. The plan was simple in its brutality: the annihilation of Konoha, the hidden leaf village, would serve as a monument to the world, a message carved in blood and rubble that peace would no longer be asked for. It would be demanded. Each drop of rain felt heavier as he summoned the 6 paths of pain, instructing them to prepare for their most devastating mission yet. Pain's arrival in Konoha was not subtle. With the force of a falling star, the Deva path unleashed a cataclysmic explosion, that reduced half the village to ashes in an instant. Buildings crumbled like sand castles before a rising tide, and the peaceful streets of Konoha turned into a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered dreams. The shinobi of the village, stunned but unbroken, rallied to defend their home, but they faced an enemy unlike any they had ever known. Pain moved through the village with terrifying purpose, each of the 6 paths acting in perfect, eerie synchronization, cutting down resistance like a reaper harvesting souls. Among the defenders stood Kakashi Hatake, a man who knew pain intimately, though even he was unprepared for the overwhelming might of the 6 paths. His battle with pain was fierce, a testament to Kakashi's strength and ingenuity. But ultimately, it was a losing battle. In a moment of grim acceptance, Kakashi used the last of his chakra to protect those who could still fight another day, falling with honor under pain's relentless assault. His death was not in vain, but it echoed through the village like a thunderclap, another soul lost to the endless cycle of violence. Meanwhile, Pain continued his grim mission to find Naruto Uzumaki. The boy was not in the village, hidden away to train and grow stronger, unaware that his home was being torn apart in his absence. In his stead, his friends stood bravely against Pain, each battle a spark of resistance in the overwhelming darkness. Konohamaru, the young and fiery grandson of the 3rd Hokage, managed to strike down one of the 6 paths with a Rasengan, a glimmer of hope amidst despair. It was a reminder that even in the face of annihilation, the will of fire burned brightly. As the village crumbled around him, Pain summoned the Chibaku Tensei, a technique that mirrored the creation of moons themselves. With a single hand sign, he drew the earth into the sky, trapping Naruto within a colossal sphere of rock and debris. Yet even this seemingly divine power was not enough to extinguish the fire within Naruto's heart. Channeling the immense, volatile power of the Nine Tails, Naruto broke free and turned the tide of battle. The confrontation between Naruto and Pain was not just a clash of strength, but of ideologies, dreams, and memories. Naruto, battered but unbroken, faced Pain not with hatred, but with understanding. He remembered the teachings of Jiraiya, the faith placed in him to find a new path forward. Even when Nagato summoned visions of devastation, even when he tried to crush Naruto under the weight of despair, Naruto stood firm. He listened to Nagato's pain, felt the sorrow that dripped from every word, and answered not with violence, but with empathy. It was a response that Nagato had never truly anticipated. He had prepared himself for hatred, for vengeance, for another enemy to destroy. He was not prepared for forgiveness. In that moment, a crack appeared in the godly armor Nagato had built around himself. Through the hollow eyes of Yahiko's body, he saw not an enemy, but a Bai who bore the same wounds he had once carried. a boy who still dared to hope. Naruto's words echoed in the hollow chambers of Nagato's heart, stirring memories of a time when peace had not seemed like an impossible dream. Slowly, painfully, Nagato began to question whether his path had truly led him toward peace, or whether it had only spread the very suffering he had once wished to erase. The rain that had fallen endlessly over the hidden rain village began to slow, the heavy clouds parting just slightly, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. Nagato, frail and dying, made a decision. With the last reserves of his chakra, he prepared to perform the ultimate act of repentance, the Rin rebirth technique, a jutsu that would cost him his life, but would restore those he had killed during the attack on Konoha. It was not forgiveness he sought, nor absolution. It was simply a small, final act of hope, a way to honor the dreams of a boy who had once wanted to change the world without bloodshed. Nagato's fingers wove the signs carefully, his vision swimming with pain and exhaustion. As he activated the jutsu, a radiant light washed over the ruined village, and the fallen began to stir once more. Kakashi opened his eyes. Countless others gasped back into life, pulled from the edge of oblivion by Nagato's sacrifice. In his final moments, Nagato entrusted his dreams to Naruto, believing that perhaps this one boy could succeed where he had failed. As the light faded and the rain ceased, Nagato's withered body finally found rest, cradled in the quiet peace he had chased his entire life. And somewhere, in the stillness after the storm, the seeds of a better future took root. As Nagato's frail body sagged inside the mechanical rig that kept him alive, Konan moved slowly to his side, her face unreadable beneath the veil of falling rain. She pressed her palm gently against his cooling forehead, and for a moment, it felt as if time itself had frozen. Around them, the battlefield lay in stunned silence, the final echoes of their long, bitter conflict fading into the heavy clouds above. Konan closed his hollow eyes with trembling fingers, sealing away the sorrow that had lived there for so long. She had lost Yahiko to the cruel games of the world, and now she had lost Nagato too, not just to death, but to the slow erosion of hope that had consumed him long before his final breath. With quiet reverence, she folded his arms across his chest and wrapped him in sheets of chakra-infused paper, creating a cocoon of delicate, swirling patterns, almost like a final prayer for the broken soul she had loved as a brother. Without a word, she lifted him with a gentleness that betrayed the iron will she had cultivated over years of suffering, and disappeared into the mist, leaving behind the wreckage of dreams shattered and rebuilt too many times. The survivors of Konoha, bruised and battered, gathered amid the broken stones and torn earth. Above them, sunlight pierced the clouds for the first time in what felt like an eternity, glinting against the dust hanging in the air. They had lived through a nightmare, a terror unleashed by a man who had once dreamed of peace. They didn't understand the full weight of what had transpired. How could they? They only knew that somehow, amidst all the devastation, they were still breathing. And at the heart of it stood Naruto Uzumaki, breathing just as heavily, burdened by the knowledge that he had fought not a monster, but a wounded soul. Naruto's thoughts drifted to Jiraiya, the teacher who had believed in peace when the world had only shown him war. He thought of the frog sage's laughter, the ridiculous novels he never stopped writing, the quiet sadness he sometimes hid behind his grin. Naruto realized now that Jiraiya had seen the pain festering beneath the surface of the world. He had seen it in Nagato, in Yahiko, in himself. And yet, he had chosen to believe in anyway. Naruto clenched his fists, feeling the roughness of his battered gloves against his palms. He would carry that belief forward, no matter what. In the shadows, far from Konoha, a darker presence stirred, unseen, but very much aware. Toby, the enigmatic figure who had orchestrated so much despair from behind his mask, watched the unfolding events with a calculating gaze. Nagato had fulfilled his purpose. He had weakened the great nations, planted seeds of fear and distrust, and prepared the world for its next phase. His death was irrelevant. In fact, it was convenient. The Eye of the Moon plan, the ultimate illusion that would enslave the hearts and minds of all humanity, was still in motion. Toby smiled beneath his mask. Patience was his greatest weapon, and he would wield it until the very end. Back in Konoha, the villagers picked themselves up from the rubble, their hands raw and bleeding as they cleared debris and searched for survivors. They found comfort in the smallest of things, a familiar voice calling out through the smoke, the rough squeeze of a friend's hand, the laughter of a child who somehow found the strength to giggle amidst the ruins. Grief hung over the village like a second sky, but so did something else. Resilience. It was fragile and bruised, but it was alive. Naruto moved among them, offering smiles, lending his hands where he could. But in the quiet moments, when no one was looking, he felt the gnawing of uncertainty in his gut. Had he truly done the right thing? Had he honored Jiraiya's memory by showing mercy to Nagato? Or had he simply delayed an inevitable tide of hatred? These questions haunted him in the dead of night, long after the fires were extinguished and the wounded were tended to. He would sit beneath the shattered Hokage monument, staring up at the faces carved into stone, seeking answers in their silent gazes. When Tsunade, the fifth Hokage, awoke from her coma days later, the first thing she did was ask for a report. She listened in silence, her face grave but composed, as her advisors spoke of Naruto's actions. When they were finished, she only nodded, her tired eyes softening. She knew, better than anyone, that the world Naruto dreamed of would not come easily. But she also knew that if anyone could shoulder the impossible, It was him. She summoned Naruto to her bedside, and with a weary smile, simply said, "Thank you." The words struck Naruto harder than any enemy's fist. He bowed low, swallowing the lump in his throat, and promised himself that he would never waver, no matter how heavy the road ahead became. In the days that followed, new challenges emerged. Delegations from other villages began to arrive, some offering aid, others seeking to exploit Konoha's moment of weakness. Trust was a fragile currency, and every handshake carried the sting of suspicion. Yet Naruto stood firm, a bridge between the wounded past and the uncertain future. His heart remained open, even when fear and bitterness threatened to close it. And above it all, the memory of Nagato lingered, not as a monster, not as a villain, but as a boy who had once wanted to save the world and had lost himself along the way. Naruto carried that memory with him like a stone in his pocket, a weight he would never cast aside. For in remembering pain, he remembered the cost of peace and the courage it would take to truly achieve it. As the sun set over the battered village, casting long shadows over the cracked earth, Naruto looked to the horizon. Somewhere out there, new battles were already being born, new enemies, plotting in the darkness. But he would face them, not with hatred, but with the stubborn, unyielding hope that had brought him this far, because he understood now, as Jiraiya had once taught him, that true peace was not a prize to be seized, but a journey, one step, one heart, one soul at a time, beyond the misty borders of the hidden rain village. The memories of Nagato's past lingered like fog upon the waters. In the silent echoes of distant storms, his childhood unfolded again, a fragile tale woven with sorrow and fleeting warmth. Born into a world already steeped in violence, Nagato had first known war before he ever knew peace. His earliest memories were not of lullabies or gentle hands, but of the deep rumble of explosions, the taste of smoke on the air, and the sight of his parents' lifeless bodies sprawled across the wooden floor of their modest home. He had cried out in that moment, a scream not of anger, but of pure, bottomless grief. And something within him had awakened, the legendary Rinnegan, blooming to life in his small, tear-streaked face. Wandering alone through the ruins of his village, Nagato had stumbled into the paths of Konan and Yahiko, two other orphans shaped by the same merciless world. Together, they had clung to each other, not merely out of survival, but out of a desperate need for something resembling family. The days blurred into nights, each one a test of endurance, each meal a stolen miracle. They learned to navigate the fractured remnants of their homeland, trusting no one but each other. The wars between shinobi villages had left the land of rain a hollowed-out battlefield, a place where childhoods were swallowed whole by the endless churn of suffering. When a mysterious man approached them under the cover of dusk, offering bread and shelter, they had no choice but to accept. That man was none other than Jiraiya, sent along with his companions, Orochimaru and Tsunade, to fight in the ongoing wars. But unlike so many others, Jiraiya looked upon the children not as tools, not as threats, but as lives worth saving. He built a small home for them, deep within the rain-soaked valleys, teaching them how to fend for themselves, how to survive without losing their souls to the bitterness that surrounded them. For Nagato, those months with Jiraiya were like stepping into another life, a life where laughter, hope, and dreams were not forbidden luxuries. It was during these fleeting days of peace that Jiraiya first noticed the Rinnegan, those ancient, godlike eyes gazing up at him from the face of a quiet, solemn boy. He had wondered what destiny lay in store for Nagato, what immense burdens those eyes would one day carry. Believing in their potential, Jiraiya taught them ninjutsu, discipline, and the ideals of true strength. Not power for its own sake, but power used to protect. Nagato listened carefully, internalizing every lesson, every story of heroes who fought not to destroy, but to defend the dreams of those who could not defend themselves. In Jiraiya, Nagato saw the father he had lost, the guardian he had never dared to hope for. Yet nothing golden could stay. When the trio had grown strong enough to survive on their own, Jiraiya made the painful decision to leave. He trusted that they would take his teachings and shape their futures with wisdom and compassion. But the world outside was not so kind. No sooner had Jiraiya vanished beyond the mountains than reality came crashing back in, crueler than before. Yahiko, with his fiery spirit and unyielding charisma, vowed to create an organization that would change the land of rain from within. A group called the Akatsuki, a beacon of hope for the war-weary. For a time, it worked. Their ranks swelled with others who believed in their cause. They performed missions to protect the defenseless, to mediate disputes, to bring order where chaos had reigned. Yahiko led with passion and conviction, and Nagato followed, finding in his friend's dreams a path to walk that seemed almost attainable. The dream of peace was no longer a distant, foolish fantasy. It was a plan, a movement, a reality they were building with their own hands. But even dreams, when they grow too bright, can attract the darkest of shadows. Hidden among the world's puppeteers was Hanzo of the Salamander, the iron-fisted ruler of the land of rain. Fearing the rising influence of Yahiko's Akatsuki, he conspired with the leaders of Konoha's secret forces, Danzo Shimura chief among them, to crush the movement before it could become a threat. Through lies and deceit, Hanzo lured Yahiko and his closest comrades into a deadly trap. The rain fell heavier than ever that day, as if the heavens themselves were mourning the betrayal that was about to unfold. Nagato could only watch, helpless and horrified. as Hanzo presented him with an impossible choice: kill Yahiko himself, or watch Konan die before his eyes. The world tilted and spun, the betrayal choking him more than the chains around his limbs. Yahiko, ever the fearless one, seized the moment. With a grim, unwavering smile, he impaled himself upon Nagato's kunai, whispering a final plea for peace before his body crumpled in Nagato's arms. That single act shattered something vital within Nagato. The idealistic boy who had dreamed of saving the world died alongside Yahiko, leaving behind only a hollow vessel filled with rage, grief, and the overwhelming conviction that true peace could only be achieved through absolute, unquestionable control. The Akatsuki, once a symbol of hope, was reborn under Nagato's command into an organization of ruthless ambition. He would use the Rinnegan not to guide the world gently into harmony, but to force it into submission through fear, through suffering so great that no one would dare raise arms again. Thus was pain born, not merely as a persona, but as a philosophy. Nagato crafted 6 avatars, the 6 paths of pain, each controlled remotely through his chakra. Through them, he would deliver his will, cold and unyielding, across the lands. He erased the boundary between life and death, wielding the power of gods with the cold efficiency of a broken heart. His faith in humanity had withered, replaced by an iron belief that only through unimaginable suffering could the endless cycle of hatred be broken. And so, the boy who had once wept for the loss of his parents became a god of vengeance, an architect of despair. Yet somewhere, buried deep beneath the layers of pain and purpose, the small boy who had loved Jiraiya's stories still lingered, silent and unseen, waiting for the impossible, for someone to reach him through the darkness. The world outside Amegakure spun on, blind to the storm that grew heavier with every breath Nagato took. Pain was more than a name now. It was a force, a reality, a law written across the skies. For the people of the hidden rain, there was no sunrise without his permission, no whisper of hope that escaped his shadow. Through the cold, mechanical bodies he controlled, Nagato governed not as a tyrant, nor as a leader, but as an invisible god. Every prayer, every desperate cry dissolved into the endless rainfall, and in that soundless devotion, Nagato found a grim form of peace. But beyond the borders of his fractured village, the world stirred uneasily. Rumors drifted on the wind, whispers of a hidden power rising in Amegakure, of a man, or perhaps something more, who ruled an entire nation unseen. It did not take long for these murmurs to reach the ears of Konoha, and eventually they found their way to the man who once called Nagato his student. Jiraiya, the toad sage, burdened by a growing sense of unease, set out alone to uncover the truth behind the shadows gathering over the world. For Nagato, The coming of Jiraiya was not unexpected. Fate had a cruel sense of symmetry, and it delighted in arranging these inevitable meetings. But there was no excitement, no fear, only the steady resolve of a man who had already died once, who now lived only to impose his vision upon a broken world. Pain was justice. Pain was salvation. Jiraiya, no matter how beloved he had once been, was an obstacle. Jiraiya's infiltration of Amegakure was an echo of an older, simpler time. Moving with practiced stealth, he slid past the unseen watchers, the patrols hidden beneath cloaks of rain. He listened to frightened villagers, gathered fragments of conversation, pieced together the outline of the god who now ruled them. The more he learned, the heavier his heart grew. He recognized the style, the methods. Somewhere, hidden behind the myth of pain, was a truth he did not want to face. It was not long before pain found him, or rather, before Nagato, through pain, allowed himself to be found. The 6 paths descended upon Jiraiya with silent menace, each face calm, merciless, imbued with the weight of Nagato's will. To Jiraiya, they were familiar and yet alien, echoes of lives lost, manipulated into weapons. He fought, because that was what he had always done, because he had to know the truth. The battle was unlike any he had faced before. Against a single opponent, Jiraiya could adapt, improvise. But against 6 bodies moving as one, each wielding unique and deadly abilities, the very air became a battlefield. He summoned the great toads of Mount Myoboku, drew upon his most secret techniques, and even dared to enter Sage Mode, a transformation few living shinobi had ever mastered. Still, the paths pressed him. The animal path conjured beasts of impossible ferocity. The Asura path attacked with an arsenal of mechanized weaponry. The Preta path nullified ninjutsu, turning Jiraiya's techniques to dust. The human path, the Naraka path, the Diva path, each moved with a purpose that felt almost inevitable, as if the world itself had conspired to drag Jiraiya down into the depths. Even as he fought, Jiraiya's mind raced. He recognized some of the faces of pain, former shinobi of the Hidden Rain, twisted into puppets. He understood the horrifying implication. Pain was not a man, but a collection of corpses animated by a singular will. Somewhere, someone watched through their hollow eyes. Somewhere, someone Jiraiya had once cared for was behind this terrible power. The battle turned against him. Blows he could not avoid, techniques he could not counter. The exhaustion that even Sage Mode could not stave off forever. And yet, Jiraiya's spirit did not break. Even as his body failed, he clawed for the truth, piecing together the final, terrible realization that pain was Nagato, the boy he had once believed could change the world for the better. In the end, Jiraiya's defeat was not a moment, but a gradual, inevitable collapse. Severed limbs, failing chakra, the heavy, endless rain beating down as if the sky itself mourned him. Still, with the last flicker of his strength, Jiraiya etched a warning, a final message scratched into a code, carried by a surviving toad to Konoha. His legacy entrusted to the next generation, to Naruto, to hope. Nagato watched through the Deva Path's empty eyes as Jiraiya sank beneath the water, swallowed by the rain and the silence. Something twisted deep within him, a pang of grief so sharp it nearly tore his crumbling body apart. But he smothered it. There was no room for sentiment. Sentiment had died along with Yahiko, along with Nagato himself. The mission remained. Peace remained. And Konoha, that village built on the blood of countless others, would learn the truth soon enough. Pain would deliver the final lesson. In the end, it was not hatred that drove Nagato forward, but the certainty that no other path remained. As the rain fell harder, colder, harsher, the hidden rain prepared for what was to come. Nagato retreated into his throne of wires and machinery, his frail body unseen, his mind vast and calculating. He was a god now, a force of nature, an answer to a question the world had never dared ask aloud. And soon, the world would know pain. The rain never stopped in Amegakure. It was a living reminder, a constant hymn to the pain that Nagato carried in his heart. Yet even as the endless storm beat against the steel bones of the city, preparations for the next stage of his plan moved forward. The time had come to break the world open, to force humanity to confront the truth they had buried beneath illusions of peace and prosperity. And for that, Nagato set his gaze upon Konohagakure. The assault began like a nightmare. One moment, the village bustled with life, unaware of the shadow gathering overhead. The next, the heavens split apart, and 6 figures descended like harbingers of apocalypse. Each path of pain moved with terrifying precision, their presence alone warping the battlefield. They did not shout, did not rage. They simply acted, each step calculated, each blow part of a larger design. The animal path unleashed a torrent of monstrous summons, grotesque creatures never before seen by human eyes. The Preta path absorbed the desperate defenses thrown up by Konoha's shinobi, rendering ninjutsu useless. The Asura path tore through buildings with mechanical brutality, while the Naraka path dragged souls from the bodies of the fallen. The human path ripped secrets from the minds of defenders, and at the center of it all, the Deva path moved like inevitability itself, his very presence exerting an invisible force that crushed hope underfoot. The village fought back with everything it had. Jonin and Chunin, the old guard and the new generation, rose to meet the storm. But Pain was not simply a force of violence. He was precision, strategy, overwhelming intent. One by one, defenses crumbled. Streets turned into battlefields. Homes became graves. And then, in a single terrible moment, Konoha ceased to exist. The Deva path, standing in the heart of the village, raised a hand toward the sky. The earth itself seemed to recoil, air shuddering around him, the sky folding inward, and with the utterance of a single word, Shinra Tensei, an invisible force exploded outward. Buildings, people, history, all of it was obliterated in an instant. The proud, hidden leaf village was reduced to a smoking crater, its legacy shattered beneath the silent judgment of pain. Dust and rubble clouded the horizon, and the survivors stumbled through the wreckage like phantoms, lost and broken. But Nagato's objective was not mere destruction. His true target was Naruto Uzumaki, the vessel of the nine-tailed fox, and the final key to his plan. Naruto, who carried the hope of the world Nagato had long since given up on. Naruto, whose very existence challenged the narrative Nagato had built for himself. When Naruto returned, he found not his home, but a wasteland. And in that ruin, pain awaited him. The battle that followed was more than a clash of strength. It was a collision of ideals, a confrontation between two visions of peace, one born from despair and one fueled by hope. Naruto fought with a ferocity born not of hatred, but of love, for his village, for his friends, for the dream he had inherited. He summoned the wisdom of the toads of Mount Myoboku, entered sage mode, and met pain's might with a resilience that defied fate itself. Blow for blow, technique for technique, the two forces battled across the ruins of what once had been. Naruto, despite his youth, demonstrated a tactical brilliance that caught even Nagato off guard. He dismantled the paths of pain one by one, understanding their abilities, exploiting their weaknesses. He did not fight with blind rage, but with a clarity that spoke of something deeper, the will to endure, to protect without destroying. In the end, only the Deva path remained. In a desperate gambit, it captured Naruto, pinned him to the ground with black rods, immobilizing him. Nagato, through the Deva path, offered his final argument, an explanation of the pain he had endured, the suffering that had shaped his philosophy. He spoke of Yahiko's death, of the betrayal by the larger shinobi world, of the cycle of hatred that seemed endless and absolute. But Naruto, wounded, broken, yet unyielding, refused to accept Nagato's despair. He spoke not with anger, but with empathy. He acknowledged Nagato's suffering, understood it, but rejected the conclusion. Hatred could not be the solution. Revenge would not end the cycle. Someone had to have the courage to believe in a different future. Moved by Naruto's words that echoed Jiraiya's long-lost dream, a crack formed in Nagato's soul. For the first time in years, the iron certainty that had sustained him faltered. Pain, the god, began to crumble, revealing Nagato, the broken boy who had once wished for peace. In a final act of redemption, Nagato chose to believe. He chose to place his faith, however fragile, in Naruto's hands. Using the last of his strength, he invoked a forbidden jutsu, one that would cost him his life. Through this final technique, he resurrected those who had died during his assault on Konoha, breathing life back into a village he had sought to destroy. As his life faded, Nagato found a measure of peace. In Naruto, he saw the realization of a dream he had abandoned. In Naruto, he glimpsed a future where pain did not have to be the only teacher. In the quiet aftermath, as the first rays of sunlight pierced the endless rain, Nagato's body lay still beside Konan, his last and truest companion. She gathered him in her arms, and with a heavy heart, carried him away from the broken village. Somewhere, deep inside, she vowed to believe as well, to honor the final choice Nagato had made. Thus ended the life of Nagato, the man who became pain, who sought to teach the world through suffering, and who, in the end, found redemption not through power, but through the simple, stubborn hope of a boy who refused to give up on peace. The rain, for the first time in so long, began to lift.